So you also said something about the world conspiring to steal your attention span, or to take your attention away from what's going on inside. I can't remember if
Yeah.
it was you that mentioned this last time, but it was someone said this comparison of the average adult attention span from, say, 1990 to the current day, and it's something like 14 minutes, and now it's like 11 seconds. It's
I was going to
absolutely...
say it. I was going to say it won't even be 14 seconds. I mean, if you watch how people, well, there's been many studies done on this recently, but watch people's clicking activity. If something is not happening within the first few seconds, you click away to something else. Well, look, Abraham Lincoln, and we're going to go back a long time now, but Abraham Lincoln, when he was doing his stump performances to try and get elected, when he was trying to become president of the United States, he would speak, or his opponent would speak. Firstly, people walked everywhere in those days, so farmers, these people who were flogging themselves, working from dawn to dusk every day, they would walk 10, 15, 20 miles to a town hall to listen to these guys speak. The opponent would speak for 4 hours without notes, and then Abraham Lincoln would reply without notes to the points that he made in his... So we're talking 8 hours of conversation. I mean,
What a monster.
people today simply cannot conceive of what that might feel like. And these farmers walked, and their wives walked all of these miles, or rode horses, most of them walked, and they were still capable of maintaining that attention. They thought that was important enough to actually sacrifice rest for that. Look, yes, and look, it's not just Facebook. In Singapore recently, and also in London here now, which is where I am, we are seeing an increasing number of people, instead of walking and strolling around and actually being aware of their surroundings. I'm sure you've seen this a million times. Now it's common to see people walking along, holding a phone, only peripherally aware of the people, the crowd that they're
Right
in.
into a lamppost.
Right into a lamppost. I mean, we just hope it happens more often. I know it sounds very cruel. It is cruel. But I remember that famous video of that African-American woman who was reading something on her phone and who walked into a fountain. It went viral.
I think there's quite a few, yeah.
Yes, it's just so funny, but it's sad and funny. But what is interesting to me is, Olivia and I were in New York last year, and we were having dinner in one of those sports bars. This exemplifies what I'm talking about and what you're talking about. There were 6 people who'd come from a local business. They all had their T-shirts on. 6 people who'd come for a drink and something to eat after work. Convivial little social atmosphere. Each person was on their phone to someone else who wasn't there. And then every now and again, if they found something particularly funny or interesting on Facebook, they'd laugh and show their phone to the other people at about that speed and then go back to the conversation. They were together but completely absent from one another. To me, this seems absurd.
I think there was a study saying that social interactions are rated as less authentic, or less, there's less connection, even if a phone is on the table in sight but not in use. And then obviously if it's in use, it drops even further.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
so
sorry, go ahead.
And so here's sorry, now I've interrupted you. Forgive me, but the key thing is this: at some point, each of us has to wake up and say, "Shit, what actually do I want from my life? What do I want?" Life isn't just something that happens to you. It's actually what happens when you're not paying attention to it, and then you describe that. This is my life. No, it doesn't have to be like that. The question that we ask all of our students at different junctures is, at some point, what do you want? What do you want? And for many people, when you ask them that question, it's a terribly confronting question, isn't it? Because most people have no clue. But the mere asking of that question provokes all sorts of internal things starting.
So Jordan Peterson talks about this, where he says that people are afraid to set specific goals because as soon as they do, that immediately sets up a criteria for failure, and no one wants to have to face that. So they would rather have an open-ended idea of what success means to them, so that there's no chance of having to fail.
And Yusuf, the tragedy of this is it's a complete misunderstanding of the learning process, because, and I know that you know this, you learn more from failing, or learn more about what doesn't work by trying something and then coming to a point saying, okay, that didn't work, that's fine, no problem. Yes, you could look at it as failure, but that's only because our system is set up to reward only success. But the real learning in this life, in everyone's life, this has always been the case, and it will always be the case, no matter what spin you put on the process. It's only when you play with things and tinker with things and you find out, oh, that is not giving me the result that I want, okay, just put that aside, have a think about how, here I am, I'm at this point here, I want to get to there, what other options can I generate that might take me part of the way there, and try it, and if it doesn't work, you try something else. That's how learning actually happens. It is nothing like the myth, the story of learning that we get given in schools, where we're only rewarded for being successful. That's ridiculous. We should be pleased, immensely pleased when we fail, because we now have a certain understanding that that route, that road, that path, that technology, that technique is not effective for me right now. That's gold, man.
Well, learning is always a painful process. You have to destroy your existing axiomatic structures to create new ones, and so even small lessons are painful to learn. But it was, I think, again, Jordan Peterson saying, the larger the structure that has to be destroyed, the more painful the learning process. And if you find that your partner is cheating on you, then there's a whole bunch of stuff that has to crumble and be rebuilt to recreate your perception of reality, because clearly the one that you'd built wasn't correct.
And in fact, I mean, the Buddhists are eloquent on this subject. Absolutely everything you think in your mind is not actually true. I mean, of course, we're talking to each other on Skype, so we're assuming that the long chains of reasoning that have led to the development of the technology that we're using are not suddenly going to change in the next heartbeat. But if they do, I'll call you back. Do you know what I mean? What I'm talking about and what you're talking about, and I don't actually agree with you about learning having to be painful. That makes it sound so negative. I'm being completely honest with you. I'm not putting a Pollyanna spin on this at all. For me, I love failing, and I don't mean that in a stupid, silly way. Of course, if something really goes wrong, like I trip and fall down the stairs and break something, I'm not going to be elated with glee about that. But the difference between my approach to all of the things we're talking about and most other people that I come in contact with is that I don't have any illusions about.
I think that's it. It's proportional to how rigid your existing structures are, and how painful it would be to break them down. And if you don't have too much emotional investment in those existing paradigms, then learning is a flow.
I'm actually paying attention, Yusuf, to what's actually happening. Not what I think is happening. This is the key. It's such. You've got a meditation practice, and I'm sure many of our listeners will have practices like that, or at least be thinking that would be something good to engage in at some point. Well, my strong recommendation would be to engage in it right now, or today anyway, and just put aside 5 minutes. You don't need to do much. Even 5 minutes of sitting still and doing nothing is immensely rejuvenating. It's hard to... I know that the mind contemplating that statement will say something like, oh God, 5 minutes can't be any use at all. It can't have any effect, it's not long enough. That's the mind's perception of what the experience will be. It's not actually what happens if you sit down for 5 minutes and do nothing. And so most of us are living this life by projecting our mind's model of the future into the immediate or medium future, or we have a model of ourselves, a view of ourselves, which is constrained by all the things that have happened to us in the past, and that model is controlling your experience of now. Both are false. If you can actually take a breath, relax completely, and try to see and experience with as little filtration as possible what's actually happening now, you will start to see more clearly. And this too, just like relaxing, is just a habit. Most of us have a stronger engagement with the processes between our ears, and we mistake what our thoughts are for reality. We believe that our thoughts are reality. They are not. Reality is conditioned by your thinking process to an immense degree. That's actually what this tattoo is about on my arms. We've spoken about this before.
Can you see the tattoo?
Sure, I don't know whether you can see it, but it's in Sanskrit, or Pali actually, but they look very similar. In the Buddhist system of thinking, and this is completely different to our Western perspective on this, the mind, that's the first line of the Dhammapada, one of the most famous sutras in the Buddhist world, and the first line says, the mind is chief, then the next line, among the senses. So what that means is, even the way you see and the way you hear is being constructed and constrained by the mind. And so the scientific fiction is that when we all look out the window, we have so many angstroms or whatever we measure wavelengths of light in impinging on the retina, and, so the fiction goes, the mind will actually see what's on the retina. That's not actually what happens. I look out the window and I'm thinking about chlorophyll action in green leaves or whatever. You look out the window and you see a pretty girl walking past. It's the same wavelengths of light hitting the retina, but the mind is carving the reality it's experiencing up preconceptually. That's how deep this goes. And so, I'm skating over a lot of chasms here, but the whole meditation project, it has one goal which is never spoken about clearly enough in my view. The goal is to see and experience reality directly. Now, no one does that, but that is actually the goal, and you can have glimpses of it, and most people have had glimpses of it. So the practice of meditation and the many steps and sub-steps and the many ideas that are being used to help you improve your practice, and I'll talk about that a bit more later, all of those things are actually about how to take the filters away, how to reduce the construction mechanism of the mind in its apprehension of reality. Now look, I don't know whether we're getting way too far off the topic here for the listeners, but
this is the literal translation of vipassana, isn't it? To see things clearly.
The problem, vipassana, what does it mean literally? Let me just think, passaddhi, to know. I can't remember, it's not coming to my mind.
I thought it was just to see reality as it is, or
that's a transliteration, not the actual exact words. I think, and look, well, let's just check. I'll come back to you on that one because I have a friend who's a Pali scholar. But vipassana, the term, is what's used, or our expression in English, insight meditation, is used to describe or to explain what the term vipassana means. But I think vipassana means to see or to know. It's one of the. It's very close to what you said. And let us say, regardless of, and let's say there's some linguists in the audience who will tell us, no, we've got it completely wrong. Nonetheless, the gloss over the precise meaning of that, and the if you like, the truth that sits behind the name vipassana, or in my case, the speciality that I have is the other wing of the bird of meditation called samatha, because samatha and vipassana were both taught by the Buddha at the same time, but vipassana has captured the Western imagination because it's actually a process done by the mind, whereas samatha is a process done by the body. My recommendation for most people is that samatha is actually the better stream in the beginning because it's also about relaxation and connecting to sensation.
Definitely agreed. I think throwing someone straight into vipassana straight away is very hard to stay on track. I think you need a basis of concentration first.
Yes, well, there's a sutra called the Satipatthana Sutra. The first Satipatthana is the body, and Satipatthana means foundation of mindfulness. And so, this is the way that I've been taught and the way that we teach when we're teaching in monasteries in Malaysia, for example. The body is with you all the time. You're sitting there listening to me talk. If part of your awareness is also feeling what's actually happening in your body, breakfast progress and all the other things that are happening in the body, or maybe you've been sitting here for a bit too long and your bum's becoming a bit numb or whatever is happening, part of your attention being in the body will ground you always. When we talk about being grounded, that's actually literally what we mean. It means being, instead of attention only being on what's happening between the ears or the thought stream, actually experiencing what's happening in the body immediately brings you into the present, because physical sensations only happen in the continuously unfolding present. You can't project physical sensations into the future. You can't project them into the past. They're only now. And so this is the reason why the Buddha spoke about using the body as the first foundation of mindfulness, because one, it's there with you all the time, and two, it exists only in the present. That's immensely powerful.
This is the basis behind your approach as well, in that
Yes.
you work into the body and then you generate more awareness that can be brought up into the mind. It's so.
Yes.
One final thought, I guess, before we go way too off piste, is just what you said about Abraham Lincoln traveling and listening to a talk for 4 hours, and it's that the instruction of meditation, even the basics that you've described there. I think in the world of the fact that this is one podcast of millions that people can listen to,
Yes.
the information becomes so in high supply that we don't realize the value of a gift of being told something like that, compared to hundreds of years ago where people would travel far and wide to listen to a third-hand passed down instruction of someone saying, watch the breath, and that's all they would say, and then they would go away and do it for years, because that information was so valuable that it was all they could access. And
Yes.
whereas now I think people they'll see stuff about meditation and think, oh, okay, I'll give it a shot for 5 minutes. Oh, I didn't do anything, I don't feel enlightened, okay, like, sack this, I'm just gonna do what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's it. Look, I mean, really the key point of that, of what you just said, is that our expectations of immediate gratification, which of course are reinforced by the internet, 10,000 times a day, those expectations are unrealistic. If for example, I don't know how old you are, let's say you're 30, let's say you're 30 years of age, you have spent, since you started to become aware of yourself, and let's say it's around 8 or 9 years of age, something like that, you have built up a formidable ego structure. And that tends to run the show in most people, especially when we're tired or frustrated or annoyed or whatever. Under pressure, in any case, that tends to take over. A tiny glimpse of stillness allows you to pull back from the pressure and the force of that. So everything in your life, or everything in everyone's life, is combining and creating the effect of more and more urgency, shorter and shorter attention spans, a feeling of, I've got so much more to do, I have to do this by the end of the day, and I'm feeling an immense amount of pressure because of X, Y, and Z, and everyone can always tell you why they're upset or why they're whatever. But none of it is real. Literally none of it is real. And in my view, at least anyway, one of the great values of a relaxation practice, and I put relaxation practice and meditation practice side by side, I don't privilege one over the other, is basically to experience yourself directly. And when you do experience yourself, when you are in tune with what's happening inside your own body, you'll suddenly see, while I'm not thinking about something, while my awareness is actually on what's happening in my body, in this exact moment there are no problems. Now that doesn't mean that, when people say that, critics will say, oh, you still got to pay the rent. Yes, of course you still have to pay the rent. And because of your past choices, like for you, for example, you're a resident now, the past choices that you made that have led to your current cycle of being a resident and the things that's happened to your back and so on and so forth, those things are real in that sense, but they're also not the only option that's available to you at any given time. When we're in a cycle, we always think, oh my God, I can't get out, I can't escape. That's not true. Even a small amount of relaxation or meditation practice each day will actually give you respite, even while you're the busiest, I suppose, that you've ever been, actually. Right?
You've convinced me. I'm gonna sub out my meditation practice for a while and report back with the results.
Yeah, and will not. And the thing is, the awareness that you bring to the relaxation practice and the way that will change the mind's relationship to the body, when you go back to practicing the meditation again formally, sitting and all the rest of it, it will just be that much clearer. It's definitely not a misdirection. It is the same project, actually. It's a different version of it. Look, I'll just touch on a couple of notes here, and I'll be as brief as possible. There's a sutra where my friend Patrick, who's the Pali scholar, has not been able to find it, but the Buddha said there are two wings to the bird of meditation. He's speaking about vipassana and samatha. And then the next line is, and the bird of meditation needs two wings to fly. It's so obvious when it's said that way. Having said that, the Satipatthana Sutta also talks about the different kinds of students. There are some students who are attracted to vipassana, and that's perfectly sound.
I think we should just clarify for the listeners, by the way, if you're wondering, samatha is concentration-based practices, so focusing on the breath, and vipassana is what's commonly been termed mindfulness, where it's open floodlight focus on everything that passes through awareness.
There are many, many different spins on vipassana. Some's open awareness and some are much more narrowly focused. But yes, basically it's about observing the thought stream. But samatha, S-M-A-S-A-M-A-T-H-A, samatha is the part of the meditation project that the Tibetans took on, and they call it calm abiding meditation now, and they've developed a whole thing around that. But the practices that are even more fundamental than that for Westerners, in my view at least anyway, are the relaxation practices which the yogis called yoga nidra, you referred to before. That's just a question of lying down with your palms facing up, or the shavasana, the course pose, as you know, and simply becoming aware of, and in our relaxation practices we direct awareness to the sensations of breathing, or the movements in the body we call breathing. We also do visualizations of different parts of the body. We also do different breath control techniques. We also sometimes we do some contractions and some relaxations in the early parts, so people can feel the difference between tension and letting go of tension. They are guided visualizations which are designed, and they are effective in this very much. They're designed to allow you at some point to become aware, oh, I'm deeply relaxed now. That's what they're for. Some of them are short, some of them are 10 minutes long, some of them are long, 40 minutes long. It doesn't matter which ones you're attracted to, which ones you do, and this is I'll now go back to the original sutta. It doesn't matter whether you do samatha or vipassana, or there's a couple of other methods that they talk about, they all lead to the same end point. That's the key. It doesn't matter which way you go. So if you find that you are attracted to one, not vipassana over the other, no problem. Eventually the other thing will establish itself anyway. I don't want to get too technical about this because this is so far and away from what we've said we're going to talk about, which is Tim's hip problem. But it is all related.
That is hilarious. Yeah. Fine. Well, we can always take this section and put it at the end after the FAQs.